Hi, this is Dr. Sarah Vincent, Executive Editor of OurselvesBlack, here with couples therapist extraordinaire Dr. Ayanna Abrams.
Hello.
So we are here to talk about some of the issues that have been raised by this couple in the news. You may have heard of them, Cardi B and some
man named Offset.
Yeah. So we wanted to have a discussion about the community response and how some of it is way off base when it comes to this whole Offset situation. So I wanted to have Dr. Abrams on the show because she really is someone with expertise in Black couples and helping them communicate and have healthy relationships, but also about like boundaries and the limits that love can have sometimes. So, Dr. Abrams, what were the things that you think this situation brings up from a couples Black love perspective?
I mean, there were so many things, and I'm sure you've all been seeing this across the media, but some of the themes that seemed really, really important because they were coming up in such a problematic way is one, just the topic of infidelity and how that impacts a relationship, how that impacts the specific partner in the relationship who has been cheated on, and ways in which oftentimes infidelity is an abuse tactic. Doesn't mean that it's malicious, but it is a way in which people are manipulated within relationships. Another common theme that has been coming up a lot that I notice it's problematic is ways in which, again, as we're talking specific to Cardi B, but we notice it all over the place, where the pain of women of color and more specifically Black women is ignored, and men in these relationships are praised or not held accountable. So her pain becomes dismissed, which can be very confusing and disorienting for a lot of women in relationships. And three, this apology. This take me back, which is not an apology. But
it's a demand.
Yes, and it becomes linked with what Cardi B is now expected to do and ways in which she is expected to forgive. And that is something that happens not even just in terms of romantic relationships, but happens all over. So I also would like to break down the three parts of an apology.
All right. So with that first one, infidelity as abuse. So I think that's going to get some people's attention because a lot of times you say abuse, well, he didn't hit her, right? So when you say abuse, Dr. Abrams, what do you mean by infidelity as a form of abuse?
So the way that infidelity presents as abuse in relationships is, I think, also connected to another buzzword, which is called gaslighting. When somebody has cheated on you, when somebody has betrayed you, it can become really, really confusing, particularly if you have a deep love for this person. And what infidelity in terms of that betrayal can do to another partner is make them very confused about whether this is a relationship that's appropriate for them to stay in. Is it something to be forgiven? Is it something that we can work through? Is it something that was just one time? But the real way in which abuse can be used as manipulation is it leaves the partner who has been cheated on questioning what they did wrong. Did I do something to make this happen? Did I not do enough? And that's why this person stepped out on me. And when that happens time and time in a relationship, it can really affect your self-esteem. It can really affect your relationship esteem. It affects your ideas about whether you're worthy of love in a relationship, and can really confuse you, and it creates a lot of shame, right? So oftentimes when people have been cheated on or betrayed in these ways, they're also not sharing it with other people. So we've seen that a lot of ways in terms of this particular celebrity relationship. But I'm sure you've seen it in your personal lives, if you've not experienced it yourself, how confusing that betrayal can feel.
And so if you are not going through this in your own relationship, but you have girlfriends, daughters, nieces that are experiencing this sort of thing, a lot of times we really do, and it's not a bad thing, but we really value the family unit. And we'll advise people, stay together, stick it out. People these days don't stick with things anymore the way they used to. And so how can people, looking at it through this lens, really support the women in their lives in a way that takes this sort of thing into account?
One is to listen to her. I know there's a lot of talk right now around kind of just listening and believing women. But something that is really important that also helps combat the shame that a lot of women experience if they have been betrayed in that way is just being able to tell their story without somebody telling them what they should be doing next. The leave or the stay. Like neither of those is necessarily the right or the wrong answer, but you want to provide space for whoever's experiencing this to make their own decision around it, whether or not you agree with it. Clinically, I have worked with a number of couples who have struggled with infidelity in their relationships, and they're able to work through it and see it through. But that means both partners have to be committed to it. the partner who has betrayed has to take complete ownership of what they have done to the other person and how this has hurt the other person. And they have to commit to a change, right? Without those parts being available and accessible, it's really difficult to actually move forward from this. What we've seen in this more public recent example is that those things did not exist, which more than likely has led Cardi B to say, I'm not going to continue in this relationship. But if you pay attention to the comments and the feedback that she's getting a lot of conflicting, right, feedback. One that says, again, stay with him, take him, you have a child. So a lot of women get guilt tricked, right, into staying in the relationship for the sake of the family. But what we see is that men are not held to the same standards of, well, if you don't engage in those behaviors, you can be a part of your family in this way by respecting what the mom or kind of what you two have vowed, right, particularly when it comes to a marriage. But when you see infidelity as a repeated offense in a relationship, that's when it becomes abusive. That's not an accident. That's not a one-time thing. Mm-hmm. That is no longer a mistake. You have made a choice to continue betraying this relationship, and that's where it becomes abusive.
And so that sort of leads into the second point about the pain of women of color, right? And how that is often thought or acted. The approach to it is often that this is a secondary consideration, that you put the fact that the man is being vulnerable, that there's a child, that you have a family, that there's like all of these other things come first. And her process, whatever that is, isn't allowed to play out like in a way that makes sense for her to sort of deal with what's happened. And again, not speaking necessarily even to this situation specifically, but there can be this sort of expectation that you are the bigger person and that you're the one who's sacrificing for the family. But what does that say about how much we're valuing or respecting or hearing what Black women are going through?
Yeah, and I think even in terms of valuing and respecting what Black women are going through, but it also kind of connects or overlaps with this trope of the strong Black woman, right? Where we've seen a number of instances and stories where Black women's pain is dismissed or ignored. Here's another example of it, that she needs to be the strong one to save the family. So not only is she also the wounded one, she's got to take care of her wound to make sure that he can be vulnerable enough and say sorry and playing to the antics and the games around what this apology is. But she's got to be the one who's now keeping the family together. And when we create that shame particularly for women, it makes it very hard for them to even prioritize themselves. A lot of women become very confused about, am I the one who would be breaking this family apart if I don't forgive him for what he did? Whether he has committed or acted in terms of change or not, I'm the one who has to hold this together. So if I leave him, I have now created this broken home. So in terms of that guilt tripping that happens, in terms of that shame, these are ways in which that dismissal of the Black woman's pain happens over and over and over again, where she is seen as the one who needs to be able to take everything. And I think what comes up in terms of gender is that it is accepted that a man cheats. I think what I've seen a lot in the comments is, you knew what it was when you got into this. He's a rapper. I think I've also seen he's a rapper. He's young. There are all these excuses that are made for poor behavior within relationships. And there's this kind of struggle of, right, that this is what an up and down of a relationship is. So this is what marriage is. And I'm here to share with you that this is not what marriage is.
No, it has to be.
Yeah. Can couples like this, can couples come through this? Yes, but it's going to take a lot more work from the betraying partner in order to see this through. This work is not on her to see this through in the same way.
And the work. So some of the comments, some of what has been sort of hinted at as well, he said he's sorry, right? But we know there's a difference between saying sorry and being sorry, and really sort of taking that self-inventory so that that cycle doesn't repeat. So what are some key elements of being able to show and being able to own that there's true remorse?
So first of all, which I think a lot of people really, really fail at and don't understand to begin with, is the art of the apology, right? And that apologies have nothing to do with the other person. An apology is you being able to take full responsibility for what you did and completely detach it from what the person does next. So oftentimes I will hear people say, I am sorry for blank, blank, blank. I hope you forgive me. I'm sorry for blank, blank, blank. I hope we can work this out. I'm sorry for whichever it is. I hope we can forget about this soon. Once you attach your apology to what the other person does, it really diminishes the value of what you're saying. So one, we've got to detach the apology from the expectation of what happens next. Because when you do that, you've centered the apology in terms of what you want and what you expect of the person. Two, an apology is not just words. The apology is not just you taking responsibility. It's also saying that, hey, I've done a thing. I'm acknowledging that I have done a thing. Not only, and again, another area where people really fail at apologies is I'm acknowledging that it affected you in some way, right? So I'm not saying, oh, I'm sorry that you feel hurt by this. I'm sorry that, you're sad about this. I'm sorry that I did a thing that has left you feeling this way, right? So that's the part one, taking full responsibility and ownership. Part two comes with, hey, I don't want to do this again, right? I value our relationship enough where I want to commit to that level of change. And two, that I actually feel remorse for this. I feel bad that I did this thing to you for whatever reason around it, and whatever context you could put around it.
I don't just feel bad that there's consequences.
Yeah. I actually feel sad that I have done this thing that could ever have impacted you in this way. That is what a full apology looks like. Again, the acknowledgement that I did a thing and the ownership around it. Two, that I'm expressing some level of remorse for it. And three, we're looking at a commitment to change. If those three parts do not exist, then we're already kind of failing. The other piece that comes up is even if you do all those things, you cannot demand or expect that the other person on the other end of this apology does anything with it. The apology is really for you to find peace and to know that you've done something and that you've done what you can to repair it, but the other person is fully entitled to take care of themselves and take care of their wounds however they will. That might be forgiving you, that might be talking to you again, that might be taking you back, and that might be none of them. I can receive an apology and say, I'll never speak to you again. Thanks for the apology. That was really, really important, but I don't have to continue to engage.
And it's the person receiving it's their timeline.
Yeah. It's up to me how I take care of myself. And oftentimes when people give apologies, they also want to demand that you should feel fine now. I said sorry. I didn't. You're still mad at me?
I was vulnerable.
Yeah. Oh, I was vulnerable. I said sorry. I might have even had tears in my eyes. I might have put it on social media and made the apology public because I embarrassed you in public. So now you should take me back on stage. You should take me back at your concert. You should take at your job. You should take me back because I'm engaging in all these grand gestures and really putting myself out there. But it's still centered in me. Because if this wasn't centered in me, I would have done this privately and I would have left you alone to then decide what you want to do.
Yeah. And there are ways that women are pressured to stay. Like, we live in a society that values being part of a couple, I think especially for women. Mm-hmm. So, most of us are not going to be on a stage where something like this happens, but there is still this pressure to be part of a family unit, to be part of a couple, and there is a value that's placed on that. And so I think it's hard enough to make a decision that's right for you when it's somebody you love and they've hurt you. But then when you have this external pressure because these other voices have been brought into it because of how it's done, it really does, I think, impinge upon that person's own process for getting over it on their own timeline if they choose to do that.
Betrayal is very confusing, and I recognize that oftentimes what we see is anger, but under that, anger is typically an umbrella term, but under that is a lot of confusion. Under that is a lot of hurt. Under that is a lot of helplessness, right? That I actually don't know what to do, and I might need some time to figure this out, but oftentimes we don't afford women time to figure it out. We don't allow women time to take a breather and say, give me a few weeks, give me a few months, right, to see if I still want to do this. It's that you have to make a decision now because, quote, unquote, the apology has been put out there. So it can be really disorienting, and then what happens is that we make more reactive decisions versus really coming to a clear call of what we want to do next and also what we expect of the other partner, right? So again, the apology, receiving the apology is not just in word, but it's also in gesture that you need to now do work to repair this forgiveness, right? But I also would need to then commit to forgiving you, right? So it's a whole thing that couples really need to navigate, but most couples don't after there's been a betrayal like that. They say that they've talked about it and that they have worked through it, but oftentimes it comes up in all these other ways afterwards, which usually tells me, you guys haven't really done the work. And most couples actually cannot work through infidelity thoroughly without couples therapy.
Good to know. Dr. Abrams, based in Atlanta, Georgia. But hopefully this, if it doesn't apply to you directly, probably does apply to somebody in your life, because this is really common. And so, you know, the tweets, the Instagram postings, all that, it's happening, but hopefully this is a moment to kind of step back and look at the relationships going on around you, and how we're supporting the women and the families in our own lives.
Yeah. And also how to forgive yourself, right? If you have stayed in a relationship or a scenario where you did feel confused, where you did feel conflicted, forgiveness is also a huge part of infidelity for the partner who was betrayed.
This is Dr. Sarah Vinson with Ourselves Black and Dr. Ayanna Abrams of Ascension Behavioral Health.
Thanks for tuning in.